Good morning. This is Senator Dick Black, retired senator. And today our co-host, John Tigges, has been pulled away for another media presentation. Our leadoff issue was going to be the vindication of John Tigges, who has just been acquitted of charges related to the school board meeting that became nationwide and actually international news here in Loudoun County, Virginia. This was the meeting that really sort of kicked off the wave of public angst about the condition of our public schools, the moral decadence, the teaching of critical race theory, which is a Marxist theory that's designed to create a violent division among races in order to eventually foment a national revolution. So the revolution against critical race theory, against this transgender, the grooming of children by homosexuals in our schools, and also the pornography in school libraries. It's become just outrageous. I mean, just incredible. And the fight against it sort of exploded here in Loudoun County. And we have been moving the left back constantly since then. And the movement has expanded really across the nation and I think to some extent across the world. So it's a great story. John Tigges was charged with I don't know what all, just some of the hokum they typically come up with against conservatives, and he was acquitted by a court, just as the parent of the young lady who was repeatedly raped by a transgender boy in the school bathroom. That fellow was also arrested. He was also charged with some bogus charges to try to hush him up, get him out of the way. And his case was thrown out. And he now has what promises to be a very, very large lawsuit against the county, and that's proceeding. So some of the school members are facing felony charges or misdemeanor charges themselves, and so definitely the tide has shifted in a good way. So we may discuss that a little bit more on Wednesday. I'm just going to touch on something that is constantly in the news. That's the question. Why are we fighting in Ukraine? Why is the United States involved in this mess? We have appropriated $110 billion, okay, over $1/10 of $1 trillion of American debt, because it's not funded by real money. It's all just put on the credit card. And we've dragged the American people into this incredible tragedy over there. It's a war that never needed to happen. And keep in mind, just to back up a little bit, the history of the war, this was really Obama's folly. In 2014, the White House green-lighted the decision to overthrow the legitimate, duly elected government of Ukraine. We overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014 in order to install a puppet regime that the officials of the State Department were actually intercepted discussing who they wanted to put in which position in the Ukrainian government. So the U.S. constructed the government, and then under President Obama, we began flooding weapons in to build up a great Ukrainian army that could make war on the Russian-speaking people along the border of Russia. So that was the background. A war raged. Ukraine made war on the Russian-speaking areas and fought them for years and years, 7 or 8 years, before Russia ever reluctantly got involved. They had tried all sorts of diplomatic initiatives to try to prevent Ukraine from becoming yet one more staging ground for an attack on Russia itself. And so that was the background. Russia did not start the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine had raged. 14,000 people died in the war in Ukraine, principally civilians, Russian-speaking civilians who lived in the Donbass. And so Russia just joined the war at a point where it appeared that Ukraine had built up a massive army that was about to strike the Russian-speaking areas. So what are we doing? I mean, what business do we have in this? Well, there are people who say, well, okay, we're fighting for democracy. This is all about democracy. We've become the big Democrat. Now, of course, we'll go to the mat to defend Saudi Arabia, which is an absolute tyrannical dictatorship. But hey, that's somewhere else. Let's don't look in that direction. But let's look at whether Mr. Zelensky is the icon of democracy. Let's be honest. Zelensky rules as a ruthless autocrat. He shut down all of his opposition parties. Now, Ukraine had a number of parties, like you have in many parliamentary countries. You have various slivers, and they put together coalitions. Well, those are gone. There's one party now. It's Zelensky's party. The rest are outlawed. Ukraine had a free press. They had some various voices. Those are gone. Zelensky shut them down. He torpedoed the free press in Ukraine. Ukraine now speaks with one voice. Zelensky he went so far as to change the date of Christmas, the date that Ukrainians, that Russians, that people all through this area, all of the Orthodox Christians celebrate Christmas. Now, nobody knows the precise date when Jesus Christ was born. He was born on a precise day. We just don't know precisely which one it is, and there's some variations. So within the Orthodox tradition, it is on January the 7th. Within the more Western tradition, it's December 25th. Frankly, nobody knows which it was, but we know that it's somewhere in that area. But the fact is that it's very important that people continue practicing their faith with the traditions that are in place. And if there is uncertainty about the precise date, we don't know the precise date when these events occurred 2,000 years ago. We know with absolute certainty that they occurred because they're probably the best documented historical events that have ever occurred. But at the same time, 2,000 years is a long time, 2,100 years. So it is important to keep tradition up. But Zelensky felt like, hey, got the power, I'm going to change the date of Christmas. He sent his secret police to arrest priests and nuns of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Tucker Carlson did a major piece on this. Now keep in mind that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not just some denomination, some local denomination. It represents 2/3 of all Ukrainian Christians. So it's a very major church. It really is the dominant church for the country. And Zelensky's secret police went in, they've arrested priests, arrested nuns, and really cracked down very harshly on the church. Now, the church supported Ukraine's effort in the war, but they have some beliefs that Zelensky doesn't like. He's not a Christian anyway. Zelensky fired the Ukrainian equivalent of the Attorney General and the head of the CIA on a single day. So he's an autocrat. He is a ruler. So the man may have a green T-shirt, but he is certainly no icon of freedom. Well, then perhaps we are fighting for the sacred, the almost holy borders of Ukraine. Now, the borders of Ukraine have varied from time to time. They're not ancient borders. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was just utter chaos throughout the East, including Russia, including Ukraine, and many other countries. And from that emerged rather artificial borders that found quite a large Russian-speaking population on the Ukrainian side. And virtually all of this combat that's gone on has been about the Ukrainian, the Russian-speaking people on the Ukrainian side of the border. So it's not as though Russia is reaching out and trying to capture all of the Ukrainian-speaking people or to take over the world or whatever. It is about these fringe areas right on the Russian border where there has just been a constant flow of bloodshed caused by the Ukrainian army with U.S. arms since 2014. And so what we have now is, a lot of people say, well, you can't possibly allow a country to cross another nation's border. But it's really important to just sit back for a moment and look. How about the places where the United States has committed its troops over the years? How about the sacred borders of Serbia? NATO had no problem at all invading Serbia, which was a totally sovereign, independent country, dealing with an Islamic terror uprising on its borders, and we went in and crushed it. NATO did that with no real lawful authority. How about in Iraq? Well, we did it because of weapons of mass destruction, which apparently even Colin Powell didn't believe at the moment that he waved around this little test tube, purporting to be something like sarin gas, and he's waving it in the UN. And at the very moment he did it, he knew we didn't have that they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. But there's always a pretext for rolling over another nation's borders. So we invaded a sovereign nation, actually an allied nation, which was Iraq, and just probably caused 1 to 2 million deaths or loss of life over time, according to some studies. How about Libya? Libya had basically kowtowed to every demand on the planet we had made. We got them to reduce the size of their armed forces by about 3/4. And we did that because we knew we were going to attack them. And we oversaw a massive, absolutely brutal attack that destroyed the civilization of the most prosperous nation in Africa. And how about Syria? Syria has never attacked any adjoining nation. It's never threatened any adjoining nation. But we decided, hey, we want to go in, we want to take them out. And so President Obama said, well, we're gonna use, we just do bomb strikes and stuff like that. And so we bombed, often in support of Al-Qaeda terrorists. So finally, in 2014, well, actually, it was earlier. It was about 2013, I think. We had supported. We had armed Al Qaeda, indirectly armed ISIS. We used the Saudi Arabians largely to provide the direct weapons for them, and we had this vast terror army. Under American, sometimes under control, sometimes under influence, and they were about to overwhelm Syria, and they were all sworn to execute every Christian, and there were lots of Christians in Syria. So anyway, because the Russians got involved 4 years after the war started, they were very reluctant to get involved in Syria. But they knew that there would be a great bloodbath of Christian blood, and they got involved just principally with air troops or air forces, and they did that 4 years after the war started. And with that bit of help, the Syrians then mobilized and began to very successfully fight back. They drove the Al-Qaeda and ISIS troops back. And then finally, the US decided, wait a minute, we're going to use Plan B, which is going to be to physically invade Syria, which we did. We ended up in a mad race with the Syrian army to see who could capture northern Syria. We won the race through some very, very brutal means. And in any event, we occupy Syria today. We hold control of the lands that produce wheat and produce their oil. And this is really the breadbasket of all of Syria. So we have deliberately imposed a famine on the people of Syria. So when we talk about sovereign borders, I don't think that NATO, the US, I don't think we're really in a position to argue about sovereign borders, because we've been rolling over sovereign borders like they're red carpets, left and right. So are we fighting maybe to keep Ukraine free? Well, the fact is that the people who have been most reluctant to accept Ukrainian rule they're Russians. They speak Russian. They have a Russian culture. They have Russian traditions. They have Russian religion. And these are the people who broke away. They broke away in Crimea. They broke away in the Donbass. So to some extent, perhaps we are fighting against self-determination. There's some people who say, well, we're fighting for values. And what are these values? Well, the head of the infamous British spy agency, MI6, tells us that, yes, the war is about values, especially LGBTQ+, whatever the heck that is. Anyway, it boils down, perhaps we are fighting for sodomy. I mean, if according to the head of MI6, that seems to be the value that is most predominant, most important. And there's no doubt that homosexuality is not an accepted life choice in Russia. Russia has been very careful to keep homosexuals having access to Russian children. and to, they're not indoctrinated in schools. They don't have transgender story hours like we do in this country. So in any event, this is where we have come to today. We are very deeply involved in this mess, and the American people are constantly being bombarded by propaganda to support the war effort. So we'll see where it heads in the coming year. But in any event, at this point, I think we will wrap it up, and we will reconvene on Wednesday at 11. So until then, this is Dick Black, and I will see you with Focus on the News Wednesday.